welcome to DTM and Then Some. Joining us today, we have the lovely Dr. Carolyn Howell. Hi, Dr. Howell. How are you?
Great. How are you guys?
We're good. And as always, we're your hosts, the lovely, did it wrong again. The lovely
Brittany Elise.
and Stephanie Elise. All right, so first and foremost, we want to go ahead and thank Dr. Howell for being here with us today. I know I was personally excited when you accepted the invitation to be here because I think what we're going to talk about today is important and still timely. I know we are hoping we're on the tail end of this pandemic, but even if we're on the tail end, we're still dealing with these issues.
Yes.
Until we are back in some sort of normalcy or whatever this new normalcy will look like. Mm-hmm. So before we dive in, just wanted to give everybody a little background on you, Dr. Howell. Okay. So you are the lead psychiatrist with the Early Psychosis Intervention Clinic at John Hopkins Bayview, as well as the medical director of outpatient services for the Children's Guild. Mm-hmm. Dr. Carolyn also runs her own practice based here in Maryland, specifically in Ellicott City, where you provide psychotherapy for both adults and children. So just to add a little bit more, how did you find yourself in psychiatry and in the particular niche, I guess, in psychiatry that you're in?
Oh, yes. So growing up, I knew that I wanted to be a healer. I wanted to go into medicine. I just wasn't certain about which field exactly. My mom is a child clinical psychologist, so I think the influence for behavioral health has always been there. It's just been a part of me in my bones. But in addition to that, in pursuing medicine, you're kind of exposed to the broad range of medical specialties. And I deviated. I also knew I wanted to work with children, so I just didn't know if it would be general pediatrics or child neurology. I entertained both of those, actually. But in my exposure, I just felt like I was coming home when I actually rotated on the child psych unit in med school. And knew that that's where I belonged. So there was no question I was going to work with children. The issue was just more through what specialty in medicine. So once I made it to child psychiatry, and especially during my fellowship at Hopkins, when I was there, I noticed I gravitated more towards the most sick children. Actually, I felt like I had a hint of that in med school, and then certainly through my residency experience. So I actually just really enjoyed treating those kids that were on the inpatient unit, and especially those who were suffering with psychosis. I feel like psychosis is so misunderstood, and it also can be so disabling and disheartening for children and their families. And so watching children, intervening at an early course in illness and watching children get better to stem the tide, to prevent them from becoming kind of like what we might automatically associate with schizophrenia, homelessness, not getting married, things like that. I wanted to stem the tide. And when you see that unfold, it's beautiful.
Beautiful background. Thank you for sharing.
Absolutely.
We should also mention you yourself is a mother, correct?
I am. Yeah. So actually, three really. I have a daughter that my husband brought to our marriage who's 19. I have a son that I brought to our marriage who's 17. And then together we have a 4-year-old boy. So we started all the way over. So yes, definitely wife and mom.
Nice. Wonderful. We love it. So let's really just kind of dive into it. And our topic is, so our title for this episode is so cleverly named as I thought, Careers, Co-Kids, Oh My, the mental health toll on moms. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about mental health and the matriarch right now. We're in a pandemic. We're all running business from home. Now we got the kids here. They're doing school, not doing school. If they're younger, what is that saying to us as mothers, as the ones that is supposed to run the household within the home.
Yeah, so when I hear the word matriarch, it kind of connotes planner, communicator, nurturer. And so those are the roles that I see as kind of, we as women and mothers find ourselves embodying. So I think when this is already hard to navigate when you are a working mom, trying to blend, your profession with your family and being that nurturer, communicator, is really tough. So then you throw in the pandemic and there's not these clear boundaries anymore, right? It's like we could actually leave the house and go to work. And then we come home and there's that instant boundary of environment, right? Mm-hmm. And so that got completely lost when we have to set up shop with work at home. So to be honest, I feel like in a lot of ways, that's one of the hardest things about it, is that boundaries keep us safe. They keep us sane, and they protect us. And so we've lost our safe protection. So a lot of us have had to pretty much try to figure out how to reestablish those boundaries in a healthy way and reestablish our role as matriarch and what that actually means, because it changes, it evolves, and we have to evolve with it.
Correct. And so that is actually a great segue into our next question. So is it the same or different for all the different types of matriarchs? So whether it be the career woman, the stay-at-home mom, or an entrepreneur, now with these boundaries being broken, would you say it's the same, or has it made it the same, or would you say they still are different?
I think that, it's still very different because it's still a shift. It's still, first of all, a stress to the system, a system that we already knew and were operating, whether we were doing it seamlessly or not. And now it's just another factor that we have to adjust to, regardless of whether we're stay-at-home moms or whether we're working moms. But I think then it's, the extra added stress of, let's say, for example, for a stay-at-home mom, it would seem as if things really didn't change much because they were already at home. But that may not necessarily be true, because they might have to adjust to, as the nurturer, how their children are dealing with being at home in the context of already caring for them at home. So,
right.
You know what I mean? And so, and then those, I think that I feel the most for, are those that may have been used to working, that had to make that hard decision to stay at home to care for their children, because it was the biggest frame shift, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so the biggest change can sometimes bring the biggest stress, although it is important, and I know we'll talk more about that later, but just to know that can also bring the greatest reward. And that's really what we have to keep in mind, so that we don't get demoralized by these shifts. But I guess that's a long-winded way of saying it's different. We're all equally impacted, I think, but it just shows up differently depending.
Yeah, I think that's a good word user, demoralized. And even amongst ourselves here at the podcast, like Brittany, you were out going to a job, doing a 9 to 5. Mm-hmm. I'm a stay-at-home mom, but I had just recently entered that world, so it was like, hold up, this is this is not what I signed up for.
Exactly.
But it can be the struggle of not literally being demoralized or letting it overcrowd you and just become this black cloud that sits on you. So I think that's a good word for
Absolutely.
everyone.
And I just want to point out also for the stay-at-home moms, I think for me, a factor that is often not considered is the fact that the kids were at least leaving the home. So that gave them time to, take care of the house and, stick to a routine, so on and so forth. But not only are they they're stay-at-home moms, but now the kids are home and they're teachers as well. So it's a lot for all of us to balance, for sure.
Absolutely. I agree. And then even just the simple fact that, let's say the kids are still leaving the house, or, either way, just the simple fact that it was by choice initially, as opposed to it being not by choice. Because what can that do to people? It can leave them feeling somewhat helpless, right? And it can lead to that kind of negative existential state. But that can always be hard when we find ourselves kind of like just being bound to something and we don't really have a choice in it. We feel more empowered when we have a choice. And I think that loss of power really gets underestimated sometimes in these shifts that happen. So it's all about how do we reclaim that.
That's a very good point. All right. So I actually wanted to kind of touch on whether this is actually affecting women's mental health more than is affecting our counterparts. So our husbands, could even just be men in the workplace. Like, are they having the same drain as it feels like is being put on women in all of this? For me, I look at it and I go, I have a very supportive husband. However, I have 3-4 different calendars around the house, so he could know the schedule for school alone. and this is not to bash him; he does very good at that. But the expectation, I feel like, is still on me to teach, do the household things, do my business, and pot roast needs to be ready at 5.
Oh,
so.
Yes, indeed.
Power to you.
Like I said, he's very supportive, but I feel that pressure, and I feel like that's more of a societal issue. And I don't feel like I'm the only one that deals with that. And even though we're all saying, we're all in this together, right? But y'all still want pot roast at 5.
Yes.
So.
Oh my gosh. So yes, so there's 2 things in that. So first of all, I echo everything you're saying. I think for me, I'm still learning really when it's okay to not kind of operate the same way that I used to in each of these roles, right? Because yes, just by virtue of me being at home, I feel more of a responsibility to cook. And yes, and to still have it ready, sometimes maybe even earlier, since I can't say, I got stuck in traffic or whatever the case may be, why dinner is late. So I think that that's hard, because as the rules changed, did we show ourselves grace in navigating a change then in our expectations of ourselves? That's the issue. And I had to wake up and realize and say, oh, no, I put more expectations on myself. And I think whether it was, and I think it was really mostly just my own doing, because I assumed that that's really what I should be or needed to be doing. Whereas if I actually am aligned with my intuition, and my intuition tells me this week, that's not okay, because this is a particularly harder week with my schedule, then I just communicate that to my partner and I give myself grace. And by modeling that, they'll probably align with it, because that's just what we do. We yin and we yang, right? So, that's a part of the coupleship. So we want to just communicate those needs. But first we got to recognize it within ourselves. Like, okay, do I need to have the pot roast on by 5, or is it okay if we do takeout today? Because it's just not, this is not the week. And got my Superwoman cape on to, when I didn't need to put it on today, So, but in terms of the, so the original question was, is it different for men and women? So I think that for, as a scientist, my head had to go to the literature about this, especially to be 100% fair, because I don't want to be like, of course we got the bulk of the issue here. Like, yes, that's a no-brainer. And so one thing that I found was, and just kind of researching it, I'm actually going to just go to my notes about it because I'm never good with keeping things in my head. I'll misquote. But basically, there was an Understanding Coronavirus in America study. And I think this was largely related to and conducted by researchers at University of Southern California. But basically, this was a survey-based research study. And they looked at responses, I think initially of over 7,000 people and then 3,100 people when they kind of took a second look at this. So men versus women, whether they were partnered or not, between ages 18 and 64. And I found that women, even those working, carry an increasingly heavier load than men when it comes to providing childcare and educational support for their children. Mm-hmm. Since last spring, the percentage of working moms who have sole responsibility for providing childcare and help with schoolwork increased from 33% to 45%.
Wow.
Then women have lost their jobs at a higher rate than men during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And almost twice as many remain without a job compared to men. Among those living with a spouse or partner who were employed in March 2020, 19% of women lost their jobs in April compared to 15% of men. And of these 15% of women, 15% of women were without a job at the end of November compared to 8% of men. So that's striking. And then regarding psychological distress, for both men and women, at least the good news is it's decreased since it peaked early in April. So we are resilient.
Okay.
But among men and women who have children, the gender gap among those experiencing psychological distress remains highest. So at the end of November, 32% of women with and without kids were experiencing psychological distress compared to 22% of men without kids. So I guess the short answer is, yeah, we are feeling it a little bit. Science says we are feeling it a little bit more than men. And I guess then for the obvious reasons. So then what do we do with that? And it's not to say that men aren't, sometimes I wonder about what men report,
That's a good point.
They don't like to let us know when they're in trouble, but I do think that, and of course, being men, they're going to experience it differently. So we don't want to ever minimize their distress, but focusing on women, we are more heavily hit.
Absolutely. And so that really takes us into our next topic, because again, the next topic we're going to talk about is being a Black mother in 2020. So again, not only were we hit by the pandemic and, like you said, these changes that we really didn't have any say-so and we didn't have a choice behind, but then we also were hit by the reality and the reminder that not only are we Black mothers in America dealing with everything that any other mother in America is dealing with, but also the reminder that we cannot trust that our children will be equally treated in this country as a result of, situations with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and countless others. We won't go through all the names. So how does that weigh on the psyche of mothers, especially, of Black mothers? Can you speak to that a little bit more? Because again, even just going over that topic, my heart gets heavy all over again. So,
yeah, and I think that it's for a reason. It hits us differently as Indigenous women. Like, I feel like we, I really believe that our souls remember, and so therefore, it hits us at a different place that actually might involve even what we're carrying from an ancestral perspective. And that might even be why it resonated with you even more strongly to rehearse that as a topic to discuss compared to others. But I do think that without even being consciously aware of it, then, that as minority moms, we really were hit really hard by all of that is happening in the world, by the leadership that only condones, everything that already existed that was much more covert. So we didn't have to, it existed, but it wasn't so heavy. It wasn't so at the surface, you know what I mean? And so, and I think that if we have children and especially males, again, as the matriarch, we're nurturers, and we protect our children, their bodies and their minds at all costs. It's just instinctual. It's instinctual. And so not only are we worried about their mental health from the perspective of like, I can't even discipline and parent the same. I'm telling them no a lot more. They can't go outside. They can't just chill with their friend because I don't know if they've been exposed to COVID or if they're exercising the rules that the CDC mandates for how we're supposed to stay safe. And you feel like you're saying no, 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 but you're also worried that perhaps even something as simple as them getting a driver's license during this time might cause for them to be unnecessarily pulled over by a policeman who may, treat them differently because of the color of their skin. And so we want to shelter them even more. Yeah. And then we beat up on ourselves about how it's always a no, because our protection to them, of course, depending upon what developmental stage they're in, gets read as overbearing, and then there's power struggles, and so it hits to a place, and I think we have to be very clear so that everyone understands that we have to navigate these things on a much tighter tightrope than maybe majority moms, given what is happening in society right now. So I think the sum of it is, it was completely demoralizing and actually on some levels really shattering to the mental health of Black women.
Yeah. I know for myself, that was this past spring was my breaking point in that kind of part of it all. Like, it's like, you've got all this, and now this. Now we got to bring this back, and we can't do anything because we're in a pandemic. So we're just going to flood our minds with this 24/7. But I'm also supposed to shelter my kids. What do I shelter my kids from it? How do I have the cut? I have young children. They don't understand, and we live in like downtown Columbia, which is a very diverse, understanding, respecting each other community. Now, not all of Howard County may be like that, but where we live, that's why we live here. So it's like, I remember, people first doing marches. I wanted to go out there, but I was scared to, because I'm a mom. If something were to happen,
who's going to care for those babies?
Right. So
the way that you would.
Exactly. So I feel like it was extremely heavy as a mom. And I come from a position being biracial where I don't necessarily, we'll put it this way, I thought I didn't understand the Black mother's experience as much as the typical Black mother. That's not the case. And I learned that through this process, which is good, but at the same time, now there's just one more Black mother having all this on her shoulders.
Yikes. Yeah, I definitely feel everything you just said. And it almost is like you're saying the very thing that I could do to shift from powerlessness to a feeling of, being more assertive and actually, doing something about the problem by going out here and protesting. I was robbed of because it's like I'm hitting a brick wall at every turn.
Right.
Yeah, it is very difficult because both happening in such a major way simultaneously.
Correct.
And children, I guess because you're also speaking to kind of like, how do you educate your children? What kind of, how do you give them these messages in a healthy way? So two things: language and intuition, right? So language is big. We want to speak from a place of, not demonizing people, regardless of how worthy the actions are of demonizing. But we don't want our children to think we're demonizing people. But let's say that there was an experience of racism and a 5-year-old or 6-year-old or 7-year-old understood that. How do you say that, those actions aren't to be tolerated? They absolutely treated them differently just because of how they look, because they just really aren't in a position to know that, our skin isn't who we are. They were paying too much attention to our outside and not our inside.
Correct.
They haven't learned how to judge people, how to not judge people. But we, pray that they will one day understand that that's not a good idea and that that's hurtful. Kind of more from a position of we don't support the behavior, but we're not, what's the term that I always hear? Judge the behavior, but not the being, because then we're just part of the problem. But that's tough,
It is.
Yeah.
And you have to, and that's the other hard part as the mom, is because you got to have that conversation differently for every child you have who's on a different developmental step.
Yeah. That's where I'm at with it.
Really?
My daughter is 7. My son is 17. So
yes,
I'm dealing with he actually wants to be a cop. And the reason he wants to be a cop is for exactly what we saw in 2020. He has seen so many examples of police brutality and, inequality against African Americans. So he wants to be a part of the change. But he's also at the point
admirable.
He's also at the point where he's about to get his driver's license. And so, we are so excited for him, and in the same vein, so fearful for him, because me and my husband both do personally feel like, as a result of COVID and then being so sheltered in the house, it did in a way stunt his maturity. So it's like, not only do you have to go out into this world and where you'll be treated as an adult, but you'll be treated as a Black male.
Right.
So that in of itself is terrifying for both of us.
Terrifying.
And then for my daughter, she's 7. So same thing. When I tried to explain it to her, she's like, well, and she came out, well, why do white people not like us? And and so that, again, pulled me back, because we are a multicultural family. I have, my brother-in-law is Caucasian. My husband is mixed. We're we're a mixing pot around here. So again, you don't want to demoralize or demonize anyone, because these are people that she loves, she looks up to, and it's a hard conversation to have. It's hard to have the right words, the right empathy in the moment, because then the same thing, her school is trying to talk to her about it. So she's coming back to us to try to get clarity around it. And then I have the added yet another layer of working in supplier diversity and inclusion. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's like, I hear about it from a global standpoint. So it's a lot on the psyche, and I appreciate your advice on how to approach it, as well as, just acknowledging what that is in regards to the psyche for a Black mother, because it is a lot. You see, as much as me and Stephanie have in common, we have 2 very similar and different, experiences with this, but you can see it affects both of us in a major way. So
absolutely. And that intuition piece, that's the second part of it. And it's just that mother gut, I am a big proponent of using our intuition, our God-given intuition. It does not fail us. It never fails us. So sometimes, I mean, because even in my work as a psychiatrist, you know, I can't, as a child psychiatrist in particular, I can't do this work best without relying on parents' report. And some of that is simply based on what does that mother feel is going on with her child. I can't ignore that. I might be able to give you a clinical perspective, but you have a mother gut about kind of what is happening, even if it's not that you know how to diagnose and treat. And so in that conversation that we're having as we sit down with our children at different ages, you know, trusting and paying attention to slowing down enough, first of all, to then just take a deep breath and really cautiously and wisely from that place of wisdom within have that conversation and trust that it doesn't fail us, you know. Even if it's their intuition is telling you that you need to not have the conversation right now, and you say, you know, let's have a chat after dinner tonight, just me and you, 8:00, you know, because maybe your emotions are not in the right place to have the conversation. But that intuition, language and intuition to me is the answer for sure.
You know, I just want to interject and say that's really encouraging to hear that from you as a doctor, to say, you know, to really, you know, focus on and tap into our intuition. So thank you for that, because a lot of times I would have assumed, I'll be completely honest, I would have assumed that you wouldn't say that. So that's very encouraging to hear that from you. So thank you, Dr. Howell.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Ooh, that's a little heavy in here, y'all.
Very much so. Very much so. But, you know, like you said, it's hard topics and we have to have it. And the fact that we have an expert on, you know, the podcast to give us some insight and some guidance, that's major, because, you know, pretty much the only advice I have is the conversations me and my husband have, and like you said, my intuition. So that very, very encouraging, very encouraging. So again, thank you.
Yeah, there's power there.
Absolutely. Moving along, let's kind of now talk about some ways we can help lighten this mental strain that we have. So
absolutely.
What do you have in your bag of tricks? That's what we want to know. What's in your bag of tricks?
That is funny. So I mean, so as the matriarch, you know, some of it is just, I don't know. Does anybody else in that word hear queen? I don't know. Is it just me, or do we hear queen in that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I think, you know, to me, reminding ourselves to walk in our sovereignty as the queen, as the matriarch, as, you know, we have a role. And that means that when, you know, as you think about queens in royalty, you know, they're treated well. So we have to treat ourselves well, no matter who is or isn't treating us well. Because as a mother, we're not treated well all the time. And so I think it's easy to get exhausted with that as in our role, and not so easy to be intentional about taking care of ourselves. So I feel like self-care is so critical. And when you are a boss mom who might have multiple children as a stay-at-home mom, and then you're a boss mom because you have a business that you're running while also being a stay-at-home mom, it can be hard to even figure out how to carve in time to take care of yourself. You're like, self-care, I don't, when am I going to do that? That's the problem. But it's a choice. It is a intentional choice. And that is one that we have to choose. Otherwise, we are pouring from an empty cup and we don't have anything to give. And we know that intellectually, because I know we've all heard that phrase before about pouring from an empty cup, but we don't embrace it. And I mean regularly. And I'm at fault too. I'm like the first to say that, you know. And so it might be a daily examination of like, you know, okay, how was today? Did I have a moment to myself to do something that actually fulfills me? Even if it's 5 minutes of meditation, or even if it's committing to watching your favorite show for a half hour or an hour. You know, an hour does seem like, whoa, an hour in a day. Just me, an hour in a day. But it might be that type of week where you say, yes, today, on this day,
right.
Yes. So I think self-care is a big part of that. The other part is communication, like when we need support. We have to be honest with ourselves. So if dinner is not really just the priority today, because I think one more thing on my task list I can't handle, let me communicate that in love to husband and problem solve together, you know. Or I might have been so rigid about fast food with my family because I'm trying to make sure that they eat healthy. But on this day, I can give myself grace and say, it's all right. It's one day. We'll choose the healthiest thing on the menu or not.
Right.
Or not.
Or not. It might be French fry day.
It might be French fries today. And you can have the milkshake. I'm not getting into power struggles in this line. You can have it all today.
That's a good point. Limiting your power struggles is huge, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes. Yeah, and you know what else I was thinking about with my 4-year-old, one of the things that's most exhausting with him is that as beautiful as he is that he will continuously ask for things over and over again, right? He's at that developmental stage. So toddlerhood till about 4-ish, they might, you know, mommy, can I have this? Mommy, you start to feel so weighed down by just the number of requests in a day, right?
Yes.
I do feel like, you know, I have to notice those early signs that I'm starting to get a little bit feeling like I am starting to get empty. Because those repeated requests start to feel like, well, what about me? But it might manifest itself immediately in my tone of voice. Don't ask me again about, you know.
Yeah.
That's an early sign that maybe you need to take care of yourself. That doesn't have to be a regular occurrence just because we're a mom and just it's normal. Maybe that means that, we need to pay attention to our needs for a second. Take a minute. 2 minutes is not going to be, you know, detrimental to the family just for you to regroup and decide, like, do I need to recalibrate? Maybe I need to take a hot bath tonight, you know, a glass of tea, a glass of wine, whatever the case.
Exactly.
Look at the balance. I love how in real time, we got to exercise that balance.
You have to. And, you know, I always tell Stephanie, that's one of the things I'm learning working in a global setting now, that it seems to be a US centric thing for us to, I guess, keep the kids away from work and, you know, have to be separated. I can't tell you how many calls I'm on with mothers from other countries, and the kids just come and sit on the bed, and, you know, they don't miss a beat. They just keep on talking. It's like, wow.
I love it.
Wow. Meanwhile, I'm like locking doors, you know. I'm in the background, but it is. I think it's a cultural thing, and it's something within myself that I'm really working on. Like you said, just giving myself that grace to understand. Look, at the end of the day, that is one of my roles. One of my roles is a mother, and I have children at home, and they give themselves that grace, and it's so refreshing and empowering to see. So kudos to you. Kudos to you.
Yes, kudos to you, Stephanie. That I love seeing that in real time. That timing was so divinely ordered, I swear.
So he snuck in here. Okay, I don't know how he got all the way to my shoulder and I didn't hear him.
And it's okay, because
on the replay you'll see it also sounded like a gun went off in my house since we've been recording this, because they were just blowing up balloons so they pop. So
we didn't hear it.
I had no idea.
Oh, okay. I was like traumatized, but it's they said it's the culture. Like, I always remember hearing, what is it? Children should be seen and not heard. But we're trying to go, don't be seen, don't be heard. Let them be surprised at your graduation. It's basically what we're going for nowadays.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And it doesn't work, especially in this new normal that we are functioning in. You can't do that, right? I mean, like my kids know, mommy records things live. I also do PTA thing. They care less about the PTA meeting, but they know Miss Brittany has a little girl that they like to play with. So whenever they hear her, they're going to be like, any reason to be here. Yes. And that was a wonderful interaction.
Yeah. But I think it's also empowering to the children as well, like seeing us in the household working. So I'll give an example. Last Friday, when we recorded our podcast, it was the first time that me and Stephanie actually recorded it together live, because we started the podcast in the midst of the pandemic. So we usually always do it separately from our homes. Oh. And so I brought my daughter, my son, he's older, he's home, he's self-sufficient. But I brought my daughter with me to Stephanie's house, and her husband put it on the screen for them to see the podcast while we were recording it. And so today, when I said, okay, well, mommy's going to lock the door because I have to record the podcast, she said, oh, you're going to be on TV again? I told you were on TV. And I was like, okay. So, they get to see you like really working, and I guess understand your profession even more. And even like, with my 9 to 5, sometimes I will do meetings downstairs with them, and, they'll come around the corner and they're like clapping for me, like, oh, you did good. So it's really, it's empowering, and so it's much as it is very, very stressful to try to manage it all. There are moments like that I'm really encouraged to see. Not only do my kids see what I'm doing and, understand a lot more what I do now, but they get to see it for themselves. And then they try to duplicate it. So I see them when they're on their meetings, for school, when they have to be on camera, I see them posture themselves different. I see them present differently. And then they'll come and say, Mommy, did you see me? I did a good job. Did you hear what she said?
Oh, man, I love it.
Because, normally it would be just me telling them, oh, guys, I had this big meeting today, X, Y, and Z Corporation was on the line, blah, blah, blah. Whereas, no, they're seeing real time, me and my profession, and me also following my passion with, entrepreneurship. So I try to
modeling.
Yeah, they're modeling, and that's encouraging for me,
Absolutely. That's a huge benefit to this. They get to see just what we do and how we multitask and how we are professional women. And that, I think, is a huge benefit to this time that was given to us for a reason, because we gotta shift and not think about it just from a negative lens. Absolutely. We have to incorporate the positive, because there is goodness. There's goodness in everything.
That's right.
And I think that's the lesson too, that these children are learning. These children are naturally resilient, but I think this is a lesson in resilience.
Absolutely.
I mean, as I told someone else, I have a patient who started her own business at, how old is she? 11. She was like 10 in the context of the pandemic. I have two that started their own business. And so it's kind of like opportunity.
Yeah.
Yes. How do we take lemons and make lemonade? That's the lesson. So, and we're best to model that for them and teach them that. And we can derive from the resilience, even as we're going through these racial injustices. It puts me more in touch with people like Harriet Tubman and other countless ancestors who endured so much.
Yes.
And so much more than we can even imagine compared to what we're experiencing right now. Right. So as much as it might feel like an ancestral wound that's perpetuated, it can also be a source of resilience and strength. And we can, as much as we have negative examples, show our children the positive examples too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a good actual kind of viewpoint to look at, a point of view, as they would say. Like, if anything, this kind of brings the Black mom more so back in touch with ancestors, because you know, resources are scarce.
Yeah,
Resources are scarce.
that's true.
Sure.
The world is not necessarily for you,
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
but you've got to, take what you have and turn it into something. And we are seeing a bunch of Black women take that step, try to be an entrepreneur and
Mhm.
succeed. The
Mhm.
success looks different for different people. Okay, so
Correct.
you're not Target. You don't have to be Target to be
That's
successful.
right.
And you probably don't want to be Target.
You probably don't want to be Target.
You don't.
So that's a different point of view I never thought of. And I'm glad we're doing this episode in February, because that's right on schedule right there. Who knows? We might find the next Madam CJ Walker out of this. Who knows?
Yes.
We probably
Seriously.
will,
People trying to be her right now, so somebody's gonna be.
Yes.
Exactly. And just, think of it, and for me and you, Stephanie, just how much our businesses have grown in the midst of the pandemic, because there's definitely a need. And I will say that, I guess through the trauma and through the pain, there's connection. So whereas usually there's pride and ego, and you might traditionally, in the old normal, deal with it your own way, or, hit the bar after work on the way, whatever, your coping mechanism.
That's real.
Whereas now it's like you kind of are, for lack of better terminology, forced to, reach out to your network, and forced to, really have some of those conversations and be vulnerable. And as a result of it, we are uplifting one another and encouraging one another. And that's when you're seeing, these positive results. And like you said, businesses are growing, and children are being encouraged and starting their, it's the beauty of it that, just as a people, that we seem to always come back to, triumph over trauma, which is really, really encouraging. So,
trauma.
yeah.
I love that sentiment. And I also think one thing I know that this whole situation has caused me is to really take a look as you're reaching out to that network. And we don't have time for people that aren't actually there in support of you.
Yes.
So you really need, if you got to do a clean house, you got to do a clean house. Like, you can't survive this with people that are not actually rooting for you or supporting you.
Yes.
So true.
That toxicity right there is, I mean, it can take something that's manageable to something where you might need some professional help, because you don't understand where, that fountain you're feeding from is what's making you sick.
Correct.
Absolutely. I agree 100%.
So that is
find your tribe.
I think because, like, I didn't know, honestly, I did not know Brittany very well, acquaintances, before March.
Oh wow, really?
Before March.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And now our husbands kind of want to divorce us and let us just marry ourselves. So, no.
That is
amazing.
Yeah, but like, without taking that kind of inventory of the people in your life and realizing, I can make room for those I can recognize. That's another thing too. Recognize there are other people that are trying to give into you or build you or be there for you. And you've got to also make sure you're the people in your life. You can't just be out here taking.
Correct.
True. That's so true. How are we uplifting each other? That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. So critical.
Well, last thing I want to get to is, so if people are finding that the mental strain they're dealing is just too much for them to handle, trying to self-soothe, going to their network, it's not working, and professional help is what they would need, or they think this is going to be more conducive for them. How does one go about finding the right mental health professional? So obviously people are generally going to look, are you under my insurance? I'm looking, okay, great. I know EAP programs are great if your company offers it, because you get like 1 to 2 free sessions or something. And you can feel out if that person is for you.
Yeah.
But say you've got someone in mind, but you're just not sure. Like, how is a good way to figure out if you mesh with a therapist or a psychiatrist to get the help you may need?
Mm-hmm. So I think one thing too, just to make sure people understand, is that a therapist may have different backgrounds. They could be a counselor. They could be, and usually have a background with as a social worker. And so they may be a licensed clinical social worker. A therapist could also be a psychologist who does therapy in their practice, and they might be PhD level, so they might have doctorate. Or it could be a psychiatrist like me. And I think we, as psychiatrists, it's crazy because on the one hand, I think people associate us with Sigmund Freud and typical psychoanalysis and sitting on the couch. But then our field has become so biologically based, and pretty much at this point, most of us just prescribe medicine,
Yeah,
as opposed to also doing therapy. But there are those of us out here who also do therapy, psychotherapy, as well as medication management. But so it is good if you're considering that medication might need to be an option, especially if someone has helped you navigate that, like a primary care doctor, for example. Then that means that if meds are involved, we're talking about an MD level psychiatrist. And so to find us, definitely going through your insurance network is I think a great first step, because you don't want to pay out of pocket if you don't have to. But also, I do know there's a shortage. There's only like 6,000 child psychiatrists in the entire country for hundreds of thousands of kids.
I did not know
in
that.
our country, Dr. Howell?
In the whole country.
This is psychiatrist, so medical doctor.
Yeah, so just only as an MD. And a child psychiatrist would have gone from medical school to then residency, like all doctors, but doing an adult psych residency, and then going further and doing a child psych fellowship so that you can learn to specialize with children.
Wow.
So because of that extra training, they are more expensive. We're more expensive. But definitely there are those that participate with insurance and private practice, or there are those that might be associated with an organization. Like, two of my jobs, as we mentioned, I do just medication management because I'm through Hopkins or I am through the Children's Guild. But in my private practice, I don't participate with insurance. And I see children and adults, but not just for medication management, but for psychotherapy. Also, I have that flexibility. Psychology Today is a good website to try to find therapists and psychiatrists. It'll be very clear, who's who, but also they're lean. Most people will do a discovery call with you also. So free, or, at least for a minimal fee. To just kind of talk and feel things out. And also to kind of it may be that we are just resource. I've had plenty of people call me in my private practice, and I'll tell them straight up, you don't need to come to me. I think at this point, you really should go with Hopkins. I know that, your insurance is within their network, and this is the number for how you would get connected. Because sometimes just need
that's great. Yeah.
Yeah. So, the goodness of fit also for therapy, I think, is really number one, making sure that for what you present with, that if it is illness, that they're doing the evidence-based approach. But studies have shown that part of what is the most healing for people in therapy is the rapport that's built. So go with your gut, because if you're I always come back to intuition. If it feels right, then it's likely right. If it don't feel right, it definitely ain't right.
Definitely, that's right.
Right. I think that's a good point, because we've done couples therapy over the years, and we've been through three different people. Got a lady now, love her, but like we wasted about 6 years, going through the motions.
Yes.
You never felt comfortable with the person. So
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it's so refreshing that you would even share that, because, it gets rid of the taboo. Because when in doubt, choose therapy, because why not? Even if it's to be proactive, even if you find that your therapist is like, I've been in this position before. I will tell them, you don't need me anymore. You know what I'm saying? I really do think that therapy won't be long for us, because my goal is to launch people, not to have them sit on the couch as they used to and be tied to me and need me for years, for most of your life. No, I want you to.
That's a very good point.
That is a very good point.
There was no talk about an end game. But the therapist now, she's like, y'all still okay. Like, I'm not with the pandemic, all right. But she from the very beginning, like, okay, so the point is you not to continue coming here and paying this copay for life. So that's I think that is a good point and very important. Like, don't go to someone that's not talking about where's the end game.
Exactly.
Yes. Always go back to the goals. And, one of the first questions I might ask in psychotherapy is, what would be different about you? And what would things feel like if treatment were effective? You know what I'm saying? At the end of this, we got to always be mindful of the goals, and the goals might evolve, but, we got to stay mindful of them. So absolutely. I too, through individual therapy, because I've been in individual therapy on and off for most of my adult life, and as well as couples therapy also. Absolutely. Let's negate this idea that your marriage is in trouble just because you seek out couples therapy. That is not always the case.
Exactly.
So, it's very hard navigating these things, and especially in a pandemic, but that's another podcast.
All right. Well, thank you for being here, Dr. Howell. I don't want to take up any of more of your time.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, this has been a really great. I feel like I literally wrote notes. So
this has been great.
Good.
Intuition. So yeah, I really appreciate you being here for this episode.
Absolutely.
Hopefully
I'd love to come back anytime.
Yeah, hopefully we can have
thank you.
Talk about something else. But before you head out, we just want to let the people know that if they had any more questions for you or want to know about your services, where they can find you. Oh, hold on. I did not tag your actual thing in there. But you do have a Facebook page and you are on social media as in Instagram.
Okay.
And a little birdie told me we're actually working on your website.
Thanks. I was going to say thanks to you. I am so thankful to you. This has been such a benefit to my practice, big time, because I did not know what to do to clean up my social media and to even where to start with a website. So I'm so appreciative to you.
I appreciate you putting your trust in me for that. But her website will be coming out soon. We have March. I think we're doing a launch in March for your website.
Yes.
Recall. So we'll have that up and you can actually be able to book with her there. But in the meantime, you reach out to her on her Facebook page or Instagram. You can just send her a message and work with Dr. Howell that way to schedule a consultation or stuff of that nature. So
absolutely.
Brittany, have anything you want to say?
No, I just want to thank you for joining us, Dr. Howell. Like Stephanie said, this has been an excellent podcast. I'm going to probably have to save this one as a reference video for myself during those hard times of coping. So thank you for joining us. And again, we'd love to have you back to talk about other topics.
Thank you so much for having me. I'll definitely be back. I appreciate you both. It's nice to be in your presence.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.